If you have a true, scary, strange, bizarre, or any kind of weird story like that you'd like to hear featured on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. And of course, thank you. Back when I was a kid, my dad and stepmom would take us to the community pools during the summer. I was the youngest of 4 kids with 2 older sisters and an older brother. At the time of this event, I was about 10 years old. My brother, being the oldest, typically didn't go with us as he was always doing his own thing, and my sisters were twins and about 15, so they always played together and didn't often include me. This meant that unless my parents played with me or I found another kid my age, the pool was actually pretty boring for me. However, one weekend, my stepmom planned for us to go swimming, so I begged them to let me take a friend so it would at least be more entertaining. Thankfully, they agreed, so my friend Katie came with me. Katie and I had been friends for most of my life that I can remember, and her mom was actually friends with mine, so they were both typically willing and trusting each other's parenting. So for our pool day, it was my stepmom, my sisters, myself, and Katie. The pool was fairly large with a shallow play section for young kids, which got deeper. Then there was a really deep side that you weren't allowed to enter because it was for those that dived or used the water slide. Then there was an even smaller water park area that you could walk through with sprinklers, arches, and the sort. As expected, my sisters took off doing their own thing. My mom found a covered table and she sat there with our stuff and read, and Katie and I made our way through the shallow end of the pool. At first, we just walked back and forth to get used to the water and slowly got in deeper until it was about to our shoulders. We were doing what normal kids our age did, like lap races and practicing holding our breath. Then we would just stop and talk as we held onto the side. While this was going on, we noticed a guy stop in front of us and asked if we were okay. He looked like he was probably in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, because he looked younger than my parents, and they were in their 40s at the time. He was wearing red swim trunks and no shirt, so at first, I thought maybe he was a lifeguard, so nothing really felt off about the situation. We said we were fine and explained we'd just stopped to talk. That's when the guy sat down on the edge of the pool in front of us and asked if we wanted a drink or something, and we said no thanks, since my mom had brought drinks and snacks for us. He then started asking us what seemed like normal, innocent questions, like how old we were, who we were here with, how long we were planning on being here. These made me think he could still be a lifeguard, since we had to be with someone 18 or older, so I thought maybe he was making sure. He even asked if we had tried the diving pool or slide yet. We were both too afraid to try the diving pool, and I think we may have even been too young, but we both enjoyed the slide and said we planned to go later. But then the conversation turned into something less innocent. He mentioned that we were both cute and he loved the way our swimsuit looked on us, but he asked if we ever tried a bikini. Katie immediately said no, and I always got my sister's old swimsuit, so I didn't really get a choice on it. He went on talking about the different ones and what colors we would both look good in, and even mentioned how his girlfriend looked hot in one. We both thought the conversation got a bit awkward, so I mentioned to Katie about getting a snack. This guy again offered to buy us something, but we declined, and without really saying much, we made our way out of the pool, and he said something like, "I'll be here," as he smiled and waved. We went over to our seats and started getting something to eat when my stepmom asked how it was going. We mentioned to her about the weird guy talking about our swimsuits, and she took it as just some boy trying to flirt with us and to ignore him if we didn't like it. Yeah, really helpful. But I also don't think she realized I was talking about a grown man at first. But Katie just shrugged and we sat there eating our pretzels. I guess after some time, we started getting a little louder, messing around with each other and laughing, so my stepmom told us we needed to go somewhere else if we kept that up, so we just walked over to the water park side just to do something different. I don't know about Katie, but I know I had pretty much pushed the thought of that guy to the back of my mind and continued to have fun. That was until we started walking back to the pool when we saw that guy was now in the pool right where we had been waiting around. We decided we'd avoid the pool, or at least any area he was in as much as possible, and hope he'd take the hint. So we walked towards the slides when, unfortunately, the guy noticed us. He shouted over to us with an excited tone, asking, "Oh, are you guys going to try out the water slide now?" We didn't respond to him and just kept walking. While we were in line, we noticed he had made his way over to the slide as well, but he was a few people behind us. Thankfully, that kept being the case, so he wasn't close enough to go down around the same time we did. So Katie would go first, then I would, so I had time to fix my bathing suit as I came back up. As I mentioned, I was typically given my sister's old swimsuits, so sometimes they were a tad bit loose or too tight. Because it wasn't a perfect fit, after hitting the water, it was normal for the suit to ride up in the back, so I'd always have to fix it before getting out of the water. I think other girls will understand what I mean. So, after a few trips, I guess the guy was growing impatient and slowed down, timing when to get in line so he would end up directly in front of us. After Katie and I went, we looked around and didn't see the guy anywhere, so we thought maybe he gave up. Feeling a bit relieved, we started having fun again going down the slide. That's when I finally spotted him again. But he was hanging around the deep end of the pool with goggles on his head. I felt like someone was watching me, so that's when I started looking around and saw him. He would be looking around in the pool, then would look over at us, smiling and waving. But he wasn't coming over to us or trying to follow. He was just floating there, I guess. So we just kept going down the slide, thinking maybe that's what was keeping him away. However, I noticed something as soon as I sat down on the top of the slide, and the lifeguard pushed my back. He was watching us, and as I slid down, he dived under the water. I hit the water, and as I sank down, I opened my eyes, and through the blur, I could tell it was the same guy, diving down there, staring at me as I tried swimming to the top. I tried to get to the top as quickly as possible and wipe my eyes to focus, but I also had to get out quickly since people were diving and sliding down. But that's when the thought popped in my mind. I was adjusting my swimsuit each time I did this. As I was pulling on my suit, I heard the lifeguards whistling. I thought it may have been at me since I may have been taking longer than necessary, but when I turned around, I saw him coming out of the water too, up the ladder. He had his hands up and said something to the guards, probably apologizing or something, but the guard looked like he wasn't interested in hearing it. So, as I approached the ladder closer to the shallow side, he walked by looking right at me, smiling, and winked. Something about that smile looked devious, and it made me feel sick. I saw Katie already standing against the fence, waiting for me, and she looked just as worried. So we both ran over to our table and sat next to my stepmom again. She could tell I looked upset, so she asked what was wrong, and I mentioned the guy again. I told her that I think he was looking at my butt. I hadn't explained this to Katie yet either, so she looked kind of confused as well. She again tried to play it off like it was some kid, but then I mentioned thinking it was a lifeguard, and that's when she started paying attention. She started asking me what the guy looked like and to point him out, but once again, he was nowhere to be seen. So she had called for my sisters, making them sit with our stuff, and the three of us went up to the front counter to explain to them what had happened. They ended up finding the guy as he was talking with another little girl, of course, and he tried to say it was just a misunderstanding and he was just trying to make sure we were having fun. Unfortunately, because he had a past that was legit and wasn't breaking any rules yet, they couldn't make him leave, so we did. We didn't go back to that pool that summer and started going to a different one, but it was still a creepy experience. Sorry if some of the details were a little all over the place, but I was trying to remember what all happened. Maybe the guy wasn't really doing anything sinister, but it definitely felt like it, at least for a couple of very young girls. And why would he be diving under the water just as I was hitting the water? You weren't supposed to be on that side of the pool anyways, so I feel like the lifeguards failed to monitor that part well enough too. Anyways, that was my experience though, and that's why I don't like public pools anymore. At least that's one of the reasons. This story happened a decade ago, but honestly, it feels like it was forever ago. I remember pretty much the entire thing, but some of the details are hazy as this was 11 years ago, and it was quite traumatizing, so my apologies if I miss anything. Let me give you a bit of backstory before we get into the actual situation, that way you can understand how this all happened. So to start, growing up, we never had a whole lot of money. I wouldn't say we were poor, and I never went without things I needed, but we never really had a ton of money or anything like that. We never had nice cars, I never got fancy clothing, and we never went on vacations or anything. That's not to say that my parents didn't try. They absolutely did. It's just a good way to look at how it was for me growing up. In addition to this, I never really had many friends when I was young. The neighborhood we lived in didn't have any other children until I was about 10, and my cousin on my mom's side moved in at the other corner. When she moved in, we were inseparable. I was always at my aunt's house, or she was always at our house. So like I mentioned before, our family never really left town or went anywhere fancy or anything like that. So in 2010, when my grandmother on my mom's side decided to put together a family reunion, and she told my mom that she would pay for the hotel for my parents to come out, and that she wanted them to bring me and my cousin, because my aunt wasn't going to be able to make it, I was ecstatic. I was about to go to Colorado Springs with my best friend, and it was going to be the best summer ever. Even if it was just a medium-priced hotel with almost no amenities for like 3 days. Like I said, I didn't know about the Lux life, so this was an extravagance to me. So we got to the hotel, and I was in love with it. My cousin and I had an adjoining room with my parents, so we were pretty much allowed all the privacy we wanted. But one thing I really wanted to do was go swimming in the hotel pool. The first night there, I begged my mom to let us go swimming, and she was a bit hesitant at first, but after a while, she told us that we could go swimming after a little while, and that either she or my dad had to accompany us. That was fine by me. I just wanted to get in the pool. So we went back to the room, put on something on TV, and we waited. After about an hour or so, my dad came over to the room. He said that we were allowed to go swimming and that the plans had changed a bit. He told us that he would walk us down to the pool and stay for a few moments. Then, if it seemed safe enough, he would be heading back to their room so he and my mom could spend some time together. Again, I was totally fine with this. This meant that we got that privacy and got to enjoy the pool. His only stipulation was that we had to be back in the hotel room in 2 hours, or if anyone from the hotel told us to leave, we had to do so without question. We both absolutely agreed to their stipulations and got our swimsuits on, then the three of us headed down to the pool. When we got there, it was completely empty. There were absolutely no other guests there whatsoever. We got in and were just doing what we did, and after about 5 minutes, my dad said that he was going to go ahead and head back up. He looked up and then back down and told us that as soon as the clock hit 8 p.m., we were to get out of the pool and go straight back up to the rooms. He then laid down all the basic dad rules: don't talk to anyone that you don't know, follow the rules of the pool, don't leave the pool room, and again, if anyone tells us to leave or asks where our parents were, we were to just get out and tell them that we were just about to leave and do so without question. After he left, the two of us went back to swimming and were having one hell of a time. It went like this for about an hour. No one else walked into the room the whole time, and it was just a blast. Then, at about 10 past 7, a guy walked in that looked a bit disheveled. By that, I mean that his hair was dirty, his face was a bit scarred and sunken, and I'm normally not one to judge, but he definitely looked like he was a bit of a creep, or maybe just aggressive. Aside from that though, he was wearing a green polo shirt, which was the same kind of shirt that the front desk attendant was wearing, and it was a bit loose on him, not tucked in and a bit dirty, but he appeared to be an employee all the same. My first thought was, oh great, he's going to kick us out. He walked over to the side of the pool and waved us over to him. Obviously, I didn't really want to talk to this guy, but my dad told us to be respectful if an employee came in, so we swam over to him. As soon as we got close to him, he smiled and asked if we were enjoying ourselves. We said we were. I told him that this was the first time I'd gone swimming in a few years, just trying to be polite and make small talk, in hopes he would turn a blind eye to us swimming without our parents. He then asked us if it was just us in the pool. We nodded, told him that it had been empty the entire time. He smiled and nodded along with us for a moment, then started asking us where we were from. Like an idiot, I told him we were from Missouri, and that we were here for a family get-together. I don't know why I told him this, and I know it was stupid, but I think I was just hoping he would go away if I satisfied his queries. He then tells us that he's new to the area and that he hadn't met many people. I thought this was weird since he literally worked at a hub where people were in and out all the time, but I also figured he meant locals. Then, out of nowhere, he literally says to us, "All right, now how about you girls take off your tops?" Obviously, we thought this was a joke, and an incredibly awkward and inappropriate one at that. I started to laugh. My cousin nervously chuckled along with me, and I told him that we weren't going to do that. He then lifts his loose-fitting green shirt, and tucked into his belt is some kind of handgun. Then he smiles and tells us that he wasn't joking, and that he wanted us to slowly take off our tops before he did something we would regret. My smile fell fast, like I went from awkward laughter to nearly sobbing within a second. My poor cousin, who had pretty much just been quiet this whole time, basically started pleading with him to just leave us alone and we wouldn't tell anyone about this whole thing, which was a hell of a lot smarter than what I'd been saying. He laughed again and said, "Look, you're not going to tell anyone anyways, because if you do, I'll find you. Now, I want you both to start undressing, and this will all be over within a few minutes." I looked at her, she looked at me, and neither of us knew what to do at that moment. In my infinite wisdom, I thought maybe if I stood up and did what he wanted, he would just go, and this could all be over with. So, I stood up and started to reach back to untie my top. The look on his face was disgusting. He was clearly happy with the situation. I was almost done untying my cover when his disgustingly pleased look changed to, well, I think it was concern. He told me to stop, so I did. Then he asked me, "Wait, How old are you girls?" I told him that we were 15, both of us. As soon as I said we were 15, he dropped his shirt and genuinely looked pissed off. After a moment of angry staring, he seriously looks at me and says, "Never mind, I didn't know you were just a kid," and then starts to walk toward the exit. He grabs the handle of the door, looks back, and says, "Hey, I'm sorry. I thought you were of age. I was never here." Then he leaves. The whole thing came to a screeching halt, much to my personal preference. Within a second, as soon as he realized we were kids, he decided that what he was doing was indecent. And yes, before anyone asks, we ran to the front desk and told them about the employee that had just tried to make us strip in the pool at gunpoint. We described him, we told them everything, and they then told us that there was no employee that looked like that at that hotel. I think it was then that it occurred to me that, yeah, he was wearing a green polo, but I never saw a logo, and he never said that he worked there. I just assumed. They called our parents' room and had them come down, and then they called the police. The cops came and took our statements, then they looked at the cameras and had us verify the person in the footage. My mom didn't let us out of her sight for pretty much the rest of the vacation. We didn't get to swim again, not like I wanted to, and honestly, this tainted my thoughts on the whole trip. I don't know if they ever caught the guy. We were only there for 2 days after all this, and they never informed us of it. So, to wrap this up, dear creep of the hotel pool in Colorado Springs, I do want to say thank you for realizing that it was creepy to ask a 15-year-old girl to strip for you. But at the same time, screw you for being such a creep and trying to get girls to strip for you by brandishing a gun. I genuinely hope that you're in prison somewhere, and I hope that you and I never meet again. After high school, I started working as a lifeguard at our community pool in the summer. We had an inside and outside pool, so I worked there part-time, year-round while I was in college. For the most part, it was normal. Telling kids to stop running, jumping in the shallow side, things like that. I rarely had to do anything life-saving, thankfully though. However, I still had a fair share of bizarre occurrences that I will never forget. We had a few guys that thought they would succeed at picking up a date at the pool, but it was typically always amusing to watch. There was this one middle-aged guy that often came in and always had his hair slicked back. It was obvious he used some kind of product, and even though he stopped every time, he always tried to get in the pool before rinsing it out. Pool rules. You had to shower first if you had any kind of hair product, body paints, etc. I've seen plenty of situations that made this rule important, even if it sounds silly to some. So, needless to say, we knew this guy. So he would come in, finally shower, and look smug as he walked around the pool looking for a poor girl alone. Most of the girls handled it themselves and were able to get him to shove off, but sometimes one of us guys would confront him and have him move along, and again, he would without any confrontation. So one time he came in, I walkied over to the others warning he was here, and we carried on. I saw him approach one girl and she ignored him. Then he found another girl that seemed happy to talk with him. I thought maybe it was a glorious day and he was actually going to find love and leave people alone, but things started seeming off. She got out of the pool, but he continued to stand there in the water. The water was about to their chest, so I could see his arms and hands when he brought them up to pull back his hair that wasn't staying in place. She came back and they continued to talk for a few, and I moved on, skimming over the pool. I would return my view to them every once in a while, and at one point, it definitely seemed weird. She seemed to still be talking, but she was looking everywhere except at him. So I started paying more attention, and I noticed his face seemed to almost be glazed over. He was staring at her, his mouth slightly open and not talking or seemingly reacting to anything she was saying. So I continued watching to see what was happening in this group. Then I realized his hands were under the water, but towards his front, not his sides. I had a feeling I knew what was going on, so I blew my whistle and hopped down from my stand. The lady made eye contact with me, and I think it finally snapped in her to get out of there. She threw her hands up and tried saying she had nothing to do with this, and as she finally moved, he did not shift whatsoever. I tried yelling at the guy to get out, and at that point, it was obvious what he was doing. I called out on the walkie for help because I wasn't confident I would be able to get him out myself. Right as two of the other lifeguards came over, he suddenly put his hands up and started smiling and laughing, acting like he had no idea what happened. We asked the lady what was going on, and she confirmed my suspicions. She said the guy seemed fine and even showed interest in a few things she mentioned and enjoyed, so she thought it was just going to be a pleasant conversation, until she noticed the change in his face and his hands went down. But sadly, she just froze in place, not knowing what to do or how to get out of it, so she just stood there looking around, hoping someone would notice. Unfortunately, we had to close down the pool, not knowing what all he may have done, and he got kicked out. Hopefully, he didn't try to do that at any other pool. Another haunting memory I was less involved in, but it didn't make it any less terrifying to think about. The community center was built in a city that was no stranger to crime. It was built in hopes to give those an opportunity to grow closer, have something special and unique, as well as create programs for youth groups to help them while growing up to break the violent history it had. I can't say it was a failure because it was always busy with people of all ages, but unfortunately, it can't remove all the problems. The outside pool is lined by a cement wall and a chain link fence to try and keep trespassers out. The only way to get to the outside pool was through the main entrance of the building. However, there are some that cannot always follow the rules. One night, there was a group of teens that wanted to try and go for a late night swim alone. They devised a plan to go over the fence, but once over, they were surprised to find they were not alone, kind of. There was a body of a guy floating in the water, and they called the cops. I learned all this when I went in the next day for work and was told that I could just go back home since the pool was going to be closed that day and for a while after. Sadly, it was one of our supervisors. The story finally got around that he was a dealer or a buyer. He was closing up that night and was confronted by someone else there that knew what he was up to and was shot. Because it hadn't been broken into, the alarm, of course, hadn't been triggered, so no one had been alerted until they broke in. I can't say it's a good thing they did, but if they hadn't, he could have died. He did live, but he had a lot of permanent damage done due to being shot and lack of oxygen. The pool was closed for the rest of the summer, sadly, and it seemed to hurt the business a bit, but thankfully it did bounce back. It's still talked about and we'll have to live with that one forever, but it did teach us a valuable lesson in security and safety, which definitely got better. So those were two that I specifically remember being pretty crazy, to say the least. I'll have to write up some more for you because people can get weird in the summer. So that, my friends, was a collection of swimming pool stories. Stories where come to have fun and get a little more than that, unfortunately. You know, it's the summer when typically you go swimming. The summer's already hot and miserable, and then people have to ruin it like this. It's awful. That's why I just don't go swimming. One of the reasons. I was trying to think of something that may have happened when I did go swimming in like pools, community pools, public pools, hotel pools. No, nothing really. I went on a vacation to Florida once and we swam in the Gulf, I believe. And I don't remember what year it is. It was a long time ago. I was in middle school. And it was right after there was a huge storm. I don't remember if it was a hurricane or not. It wasn't a big one, if so. But the beach that we went to, I remember having to be careful whenever we walked around because there were a lot of jellyfish all over the beach, which was weird, but it was a good time. My cousin kept getting bit or pinched by something in the water, which kind of freaked me out, but I think that's probably the worst that I can think of. Nothing too crazy. How about you? Have you guys ever had any weird experience swimming? And in the meantime, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below. It's the first swimming pool stories we've had. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know. It's June now. Do you have any plans for the summer? Any vacations? Anything that makes you happy that you look forward to? I'd love to hear. And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. And until next time, take care.